Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into ecotourism and, going beyond just the basics.
It's more than just a definition, right? It's a whole movement.
Yeah, exactly. And we really want to equip you with the tools and the vocabulary to discuss ecotourism in English.
Because it really is a global thing.
Absolutely.
And English is often that common language that, connects everyone.
Yeah. Think about all those resources that are out there.
Yeah.
Articles and guides and everything. So much of it's in English.
Right. And even connecting with other people who are passionate about it.
Yeah.
You're probably going to be speaking English with them.
You're more likely to find those in-depth resources if you're fluent in discussing it in English. So let's start building that fluency right now with some key vocabulary, those essential terms we need to know.
Yeah, like sustainability.
Ooh, sustainability.
We hear it all the time. What does it actually mean when we're talking about travel?
Okay, yeah.
I think it's about finding that balance, enjoying a place today, but without wrecking it for the people who come after us.
I like that. That makes it really click for now.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I want my kids to be able to see these amazing places.
Exactly.
And their kids and so on.
It's like being a good guest on the planet.
Right.
Leaving things better than you found them. And that brings us to another term, your carbon footprint.
Okay, carbon footprint.
Did you know that, just flying contributes a huge amount to global CO2 emissions, something like 2.5%.
Seriously, 2.5% just from planes.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Wow. So every flight we take, every car journey, it all adds up.
Exactly. That's why thinking about alternatives, like maybe taking the train instead of a short flight, can actually make a difference.
Makes you think twice about those quick hops, doesn't it?
It does. And then there's biodiversity.
Biodiversity.
All those incredible plants and animals and ecosystems and how they're all connected.
It's amazing to think about, right?
It is. But sadly, we're losing biodiversity at an alarming rate.
And tourism plays a role in that.
Yeah. Habitat loss due to tourism is a big factor.
So that's where ecotourism comes in, right?
Exactly.
It's about traveling in a way that actually helps to protect these places.
Yeah, not just visiting them, but making sure they thrive.
Like supporting those local communities who depend on these ecosystems.
Imagine a small lodge in a rainforest powered by solar energy, employing people from the village nearby.
Perfect example.
That's the kind of thing we're talking about.
So we're being eco-friendly travelers, but also supporting the bigger picture of conservation efforts.
Right, like protecting endangered species and preserving natural resources, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, marine reserves.
Those are all conservation efforts. Makes sense. But what about that term community-based tourism? How is that different from ecotourism?
That's a great question.
Because they seem pretty connected.
They often go hand in hand. But community-based tourism really emphasizes involving local communities directly.
Oh, I see.
So staying in a family-run guest house or choosing tours led by indigenous guides.
Making sure the benefits go straight to the people who live there.
Exactly. Empowering communities through tourism.
Love that. And then there's that phrase, leave no trace.
Ah.
Is it really possible to travel and leave absolutely no trace?
Well, it's more of an ideal, right?
Yeah.
A way of thinking about how we can minimize our impact.
Okay.
It's about things like packing out your trash, sticking to the trails, respecting wildlife.
So being super mindful of our surroundings.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got some great terms here.
Right.
But how do we actually use these in conversations?
That's where those handy phrases come in.
Right, because sometimes I want to talk about, sustainable travel and all. But I'm not always sure how to say it.
I get it. It can feel a bit awkward.
Yeah, it does.
But don't worry. We've got you covered. We're going to give you some phrases that will help you sound confident and express your passion for ecotourism.
Perfect. So, what are some good conversation starters?
Well, let's imagine you're chatting with someone about sustainable travel in general. You could simply say, I'm really passionate about traveling in a way that minimizes my impact on the planet.
Simple and to the point. I like it.
Right.
What if I wanted to highlight the importance of reducing waste, while traveling?
You could say something like, it's amazing how much waste we can prevent while traveling just by carrying a reusable water bottle and opting for eco-friendly accommodations.
Oh, that's a good
Huh?
one.
Yeah.
Actually, I started doing that recently, and it feels so good to make those little changes.
It does, right? It's empowering. What about when you're talking about specific destinations?
Yeah.
Places that are known for their ecotourism efforts. Like if you're talking about Costa Rica, for instance, you could say, Costa Rica is a leader in ecotourism with incredible initiatives to protect its rainforests and promote sustainable agriculture.
Costa Rica, definitely on my bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what if you're talking to someone who doesn't really know much about ecotourism?
Oh, that's a great opportunity to share your knowledge.
It is.
So to explain something like community-based tourism, you could say, one of the things I love about ecotourism is that it often supports local communities.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Choosing tours run by Indigenous guides or staying in family-run guest houses ensures that the tourism revenue directly benefits the people who live there.
That's a really nice way to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really showcases a different way of traveling, too.
Yeah.
Okay, what if you encounter someone who's, like, skeptical?
Skepticism.
Yeah.
It's good to be prepared for that. Remember those facts and figures we talked about earlier? You could say something like, I understand the skepticism, but there's growing evidence that ecotourism, when done right, can play a crucial role in conservation.
Yeah.
For example, did you know that in some areas, ecotourism has directly contributed to the recovery of endangered species?
Mm.
Having those concrete examples can really make a difference.
It's about changing the narrative.
It is.
Showing that ecotourism can actually have a real impact. Okay, so we've covered vocabulary, we've got some phrases to use, but are there any, like, conversational traps we should watch out for?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, no.
Even with the best intentions, we can make mistakes.
Okay.
So we're going to dive into those common pitfalls next.
All right, let's avoid those.
So you can sound even more like an ecotourism pro.
I love it.
Let's do it.
So we've got all this great vocabulary and these handy phrases to use, but now I'm really curious about those conversational pitfalls you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like where we might accidentally, trip ourselves up when we're talking about ecotourism.
Yeah, for sure. Even when we have the best intentions, it's easy to kind of make mistakes. And one of the common ones is, misusing terms. Like people often mix up ecotourism with adventure tourism.
Yeah. I remember I used to think they were basically the same thing.
Right.
But then I realized adventure tourism, that's more about the thrill. Right.
Bungee jumping, whitewater rafting, getting that adrenaline rush.
Exactly. While ecotourism, it's really about minimizing our impact.
It's all about protecting the environment.
And supporting those local communities.
Exactly. Another common mistake is maybe using too much jargon.
Oh, yeah.
We've learned all these specialized terms today, but not everyone knows them.
Oh, I'm so guilty of this. Sometimes I get carried away talking about regenerative travel and circular economies and stuff, and I can see people's eyes glazing over.
Right.
It's like I'm speaking a different language.
Exactly.
So what should we do instead?
Well, if you do use a less common term, just be ready to explain it briefly. Or maybe rephrase it using simpler language.
That makes sense. We want to make sure everyone feels included in the conversation.
Right. It's not about showing off how much you know.
It's about sharing the passion.
Exactly. And another thing I watch out for is forgetting about context.
Context, okay.
Yeah. Sometimes we jump into talking about specific ecotourism projects without giving enough background information.
Right. So people understand why it matters.
Exactly. It's like starting a story in the middle.
People are going to be like, wait, what's going on?
Right.
Who are these people?
Exactly. So always think about your audience. What do they already know?
And what do they need to know?
To really appreciate what you're talking about.
So if I'm telling someone about an amazing community-based tourism project in Nepal,
right,
but they've never been there, they don't know anything about the region, the challenges,
right,
then they're not going to get the full impact.
Exactly.
So
set the stage.
Paint the picture.
Connect the dots for them.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of context, I've heard some people say that leave no trace is kind of impossible in certain situations.
Interesting.
Especially in more remote areas, maybe where there's not much infrastructure for waste management and things like that.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So how do we reconcile that with this idea of leaving no trace.
Well, I think highlights the fact that responsible travel, it's not always simple.
Right.
Leave no trace. It's more of a guiding principle than a strict rule.
Okay.
It encourages us to be mindful
Yeah.
and to adapt our actions depending on where we are.
So it's about doing our best within the given circumstances.
Exactly. There will be times when minimizing our impact requires, getting creative.
Yeah.
Maybe finding new solutions.
Right.
It's a continuous learning process. And even experts, we're always learning new things.
Yeah.
And evolving in our understanding of sustainable travel.
That makes me feel better, actually. Because sometimes it feels like there's so much pressure to be perfect.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But it sounds like it's more about approaching travel with a conscious mindset.
Exactly. Being aware of the choices we're making.
And trying to make the best ones we can.
Exactly. And, not beating ourselves up if we don't always get it right.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about these potential pitfalls, things to watch out for.
Right.
But now I'm curious, where do we go from here? How do we actually put all this knowledge into action?
Okay, so we've covered a lot in our ecotourism deep dive, right? We've talked about why it's so important to be able to discuss it in English. We've learned some really key vocabulary and those useful phrases. And we even, talked about those conversational pitfalls so we don't accidentally trip ourselves up.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. But I think the most important thing we've touched on is why ecotourism really matters,
Absolutely.
Why those choices we make as travelers, they actually do have a real impact.
It's like, what's that saying? With great power comes great responsibility. Oh, yeah. I like that one.
We've got this incredible privilege to explore the world, right? And now we're armed with the knowledge and the language to do it in a way that really minimizes our harm.
I think that's a great way to put it. And, we often hear about protecting the planet for future generations, which is super important.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the future. It's about, preserving those incredible places for everyone right now.
It's for us too, right?
Exactly.
And one thing that really struck me during our conversation is just how connected everything is. From our flights to the hotels we choose, the tours we take, it all kind of adds up to this bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And that interconnectedness, it's what makes ecotourism so fascinating, right?
It does.
It's not just about individual actions, it's about understanding those complex relationships between tourism and conservation and those local communities.
It's like a giant puzzle, and every piece has its place.
That's a great analogy. And that's where communication comes in, right? Using the language, the insights that we've talked about today, it allows us to advocate for change, inspire other people, and make those informed choices when we travel.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners actually do to put this knowledge into action?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. Now that you're more familiar with all those ecotourism concepts, start noticing those things when you're traveling.
Okay.
Ask those questions like, how are hotels and tour operators, how are they incorporating sustainability into their practices? And then, support the businesses that are making an effort.
So those are practical steps we can take, like choosing a reusable water bottle.
Exactly, those little choices. Even, opting for that locally owned restaurant instead of a big chain.
Yeah, those everyday decisions.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of just talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Sharing what you've learned with friends, with family.
Starting those conversations.
Exactly. Making ecotourism part of, our everyday travel conversation.
Love that. Spreading the word. So for our listeners, now that you're equipped to talk about ecotourism, we have a question for you. What destinations or what sustainable travel practices are you most interested in exploring further? What steps can you take to make your own travel more eco-conscious? We want to hear from you.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those conversations going, Your voice matters, and together we can make a difference.
Safe and sustainable travels, everyone.